Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 4 of the anime series, Everything Becomes F, The Perfect Insider. And I think from right out of the gate, the one thing I found the most intriguing about this episode was stuff was actually happening in it. You know, if you've been following my episodic reviews of episodes 1 through 3 thus far, my biggest gripe, my biggest complaint has been nothing has been happening. Characters have been sitting around, psychobabbling back and forth, not even really investigating, looking for clues. Murders are happening in this place, and nobody's doing a damn thing. Oh, they were going to try to call the cops, but they couldn't. They were looking at the programming, the red programming, whatever it is. They realized somebody must have deliberately, hacked it or created it, designed it this way, that way, the other way, whatever it is. Just no results, nothing interesting was happening. And then in this episode, it's kind of a stark contrast because suddenly people are doing the things I want to see them doing. I've been wanting to see them doing. Most notably going into Magata's room and investigating the environment and all this kind of stuff. It was like so captivating to me, and I'm almost surprising myself with how much into it I was. They basically, I have to say they were successful in laying the groundwork of my interest, because now we're getting somewhere. Now we're yielding other clues and getting to know Magata a little bit more. We still have these flashbacks that are really unnerving and everything. We find out in this episode she has multiple personalities, and there's a callback to that thing from the first episode about the number 7 being the lonely number, which really mystified me. I'm not a mathematician. I don't get into numbers like that. That kind of perplexed me, and I didn't really understand if this was just that sort of pretentiousness that I was, feeling like this show has, as if it was trying to seem smarter than it actually is. And the whole purpose of this is to basically let us into the mind's eye of Magata, who is this high intellectual person. And she has these technological skills and all this kind of stuff. So in a way, this is her communicating her loneliness, equating it through the numerical code and everything like that. And that to me made it much more fascinating. This coinciding with the interesting, once again, sort of developing dynamic between Nishina Sono and Magata. We're finding much more about their conversations out. Like, it was sort of pinpointed to her interest in Saikawa, and now there's something unspoken that Nishina Sono is, very much compelled by the color purple, its importance, or the importance of something to do with that. She takes it upon herself to sort of, stare at the corpse of who we believe to be Dr. Magata. And I wondered if she was talking about the lipstick when she mentioned the color, and then she has sort of this dream sequence toward the end, which once again calls back on the loss of her parents. And it seems to have something to do with the dialogue between she and Magata. And Magata very much is talking about, how did you feel when your parents died, when you lost your parents, in effect? And she seems taken aback by that, Nishina Sono. And there's a question of, well, was somebody at your side? And I think what the implication there is, this is Saikawa. Maybe in the loss of her parents, Saikawa was actually kind of uncharacteristically there for Nishina Sono, was there to, comfort her and be there for her with open arms, and this might have been what burgeoned her fascination and interest in him, which he seems still very oblivious to, or at least he's aware of it, but I don't think he necessarily shares that interest. But we do see that he is actually compassionate toward her, because when she is staring at this particular corpse, who may or may not be the genuine Dr. Magata, he, covers it. He's like, don't stare at it, don't wig yourself out, don't do this to yourself. And he seems to have concern for Nishina Sono, so at least he's aware of it potentially affecting her. From the get-go, we, of course, pick up with the murder of this director, the seeming murder, and I don't necessarily know if I believe that this guy was killed, that there is a killer on the loose. Nishina Sono's dialogue seems to almost completely deadlock the fact that there has to be a killer roving around this, facility. They were on the roof. They somehow got in and out. The whole server, the system, Deborah and everything, the red system, all these things are faulty, or they were deliberately programmed and hacked and all this kind of stuff to basically misaccount for who's been coming and going and all this kind of stuff. We had new characters debuted in the last episode, the doctor guy, the director's wife and everything. We didn't see how they came and went fully and everything. So of course I have suspicions along those lines, but I also had a burgeoning theory about the director, which I'll get back to. But in the idea of, basically going into Magata's room and seeing that she has the living space, the way it's set up, it almost appears as though there was more than one person there, whether this was her and a child, whether I really have no idea. It was very intriguing to me that, like I say, what blew my mind was they go to the bedroom, the door is locked, and you hear that voice. Now, I knew it was sort of a robotic voice, and I'm thinking, did she create an AI? She has this technical prowess, and it turns out to be this robot. And I'm calling back to that line, which they also call back to in this episode, where she's talking about, I witnessed a doll kill my parents. Well, they kind of sort of explain it that maybe she considered herself to be a doll because she was such a young age, and with this high intellect and being sort of overlorded in her own estimation by her parents, by her uncle, whatever it is, maybe she felt as though she didn't have control over her life and was doll-like, And when they reveal this idea of the personalities, not only are we seeing how that affected the past, that in a sense, it seems like the uncle wasn't so much, even though he was attracted to her in her young age, which, again, unnerving, it does seem as though Magata and her personalities came to this conclusion of their own accord, and she wanted to take control of her life. Maybe what she wanted to lose was not so much her virginity as her sense of being doll-like, as her sense of being commandeered and not having the right and the will of her own to live her own life. And thus, by taking the reins, so to speak, of pushing herself on the uncle, as we seem to have implied to us, that while the uncle has this fascination with her and these interests in her, it's her that really pushes him over the edge and pushes herself on him. That seems to get that ball rolling, and maybe that was her first estimation of actually having a will of her own, that she could do with her life what she pleased. And that's, again, okay. And that could also provide motive if, like, the director's wife, who, as I say, was just debuted last episode, if she had stumbled onto an illicit affair between them, might she have had call to kill them? Kill her, punish her, why dress her up in the wedding dress? I don't know. Of course, Nishina Sono then wonders, was this wedding dress something she created? She had a device to do all the sewing and everything, and like materials, but no, she bought it, and much as she bought like the blocks, and there does seem to be an element of arrested development. As highly intellectual as Magata was, or perhaps these are her other personalities. Obviously, while she felt, air quotes, alone, she wasn't. And you could suggest that because of this high intellect, because of the burdens of this young mind, her creating those personalities were sort of a way, and as well as this robot really, were a way of dealing with that, coping with that, maybe. It's all just really twisted and interesting. And as I say, for me personally, my theory has kind of evolved to an idea of, could this have been a murder-suicide? Could this love affair that was existing between the director, her uncle, and Magata, could something have really become twisted in all of this? Could his mind have broken? Because it seems like he almost is resigned to the fact in his narration of her seducing him and pushing herself on him and everything. Like, could this just be a life he fell into, and maybe he needed to destroy her? Maybe she was going to have a child or something along those lines, or she had a child and she was becoming unruly. Maybe she was threatening to go to the wife, maybe something, this, that, or the other thing. Maybe they concocted this in her own madness, because it seems like these, all these personalities are almost communicating back and forth, even on the computer, which Saikawa doesn't necessarily believe to be genuine, might be at the hands of the killer. But whatever is going on here, I almost have to wonder if the director killed her and this was a plan they concocted. Now, the only sort of holding back of that theory having any validity is the fact that, as Nishina Sono is very quick to point out, well, the director couldn't have killed himself in that way, on that roof, in the helicopter. And I don't necessarily believe that to be the case. If you see where that knife is, it's in the back of his neck. Only one of his arms is holding the joystick of the helicopter. it would have been very easy for him to position the knife behind his head with that sort of headrest bar thing in the helicopter, and just in one fast move, junted his head back and pushed that knife into his neck. Would it have necessarily killed him? Well, we don't know all of what's going on there. You know, I don't know if he would have been able to necessarily kill himself without the aid of maybe drugging himself, taking, you know, so many pills or something like that to coincide with it. That's kind of been my thinking. I've been waiting for like some kind of twist in this series, and the twist that seems the most appealing to me at the moment, with all of the evidence in tow, is that Magata, you know, for whatever reason, her personalities, her psychosis, was facing a wall that she knew she could never climb over, in a sense. Whether that be having a child, a love child, whether that be this life of confinement, she felt like she needed to end it. Or perhaps the uncle did, you know, this director guy who she had this affair with. Whatever the purposes, I think they both maybe, you know, both of these minds collectively came together, and all of those personalities came together and came up with this plan that would make their deaths a mystery, to misdirect, simply to have that question kill and waste a lot of time so that people were left guessing effectively. So no straight answers would necessarily come. And maybe he took it upon himself to kill her, get rid of the evidence, get rid of the limbs, as Nishina Sono, we see once again sort of looking into how her character is the posh rich girl and everything, when she's talking about, oh, well, they could have chopped up the limbs and everything, put them down the trash chute, and you have Saikawa sitting over here, you don't really know what the term delicacy means, do you? And she's like, oh, it's a delicious dish, you know? She has no idea about reining herself in. Either that or she's playing around, but whatever the case, she brings that up, that they could have chopped up the limbs, threw it down the trash chute, dressed her up in this wedding dress. What was the purpose of this? Could it have been a soliloquy, as I mentioned in my sort of theorizing in my last episode discussion video, that this was meant to be symbolic of the bond the uncle, the director, and she had between them, and that they would forever be in death together. You know, obviously this wedding dress belonged to one of the personalities, I think the one, you know, that was like cleaning up the place, because, you know, you have the one who was like, oh, I'm going to miss, you know, Mishiru, the robot. The robot really wanted to leave. I think it was Kishio or something. And it's like Sasaki, who talks about having cleaned up. Unless it plays into the idea that I had in and discussed in my last video about Magata switching herself out with her sister, murdering her sister, making her appearance look as though she is her sister, you know, inhabiting her sister's guise, and everything like that. What I was left with by the end of this episode, with all of this evidence, with all of this aspect of her personalities, her conversation with Nishina Sono's own interests in her and everything like that, the revelation of everything becomes F, that titular phrase being something contained within this plan. I almost have to wonder if it actually does play into what I said a couple episodes back now, everything becomes F'd up. I'm wondering if this is all deliberate at the hands of Magata, and whether that was Magata herself killing herself for some reason, you know, again, a murder-suicide plot where maybe she was having a love child, maybe they were about to be found out, this affair that was probably ongoing. It could play into all of that. It could be that she, you know, made this uncle think that was going to be the case, and effectively decided to fake him out as well as everyone else, and is just playing with everybody. Maybe these are these multiple personalities at work. Everything becomes F, trying to F with everybody, you know, that kind of thing. Suffice to say, I still have no answers for certain by the end of this episode, but I can wholeheartedly say I'm much more drawn into it because things are actually happening. Characters are actually looking around, trying to investigate, trying to piece it together. While we did have a couple of sequences where they were just standing around talking and feeling things out and what, you know, going over things in their minds and everything like that, it was still much more interesting because it was coinciding with actual activity, actual momentum, actually investigating the environment, going into the personal digs of Magata and uncovering all of this stuff about her personalities. How can you formulate a hypothesis with no evidence, with a lack of evidence, and being stonewalled and yielding no results time and time again, which was my issue with the first 3 episodes. Here we actually have them investigating. They are finding successive clues, and each of these clues probably, extends to the overarching aspect of the plot. Will it play out that we find the director's wife killed, Magata and her husband because of that affair? She found out about it. Is there someone else in this facility who might have, fallen in love with Magata, and this was their way of rebelling against maybe the crunch down of the uncle? Maybe the uncle was commandeering. Maybe he evolved into being the one pushing Magata back, even though it seems in these flashbacks he was the one succumbed to by her advances. All of these different things. Maybe it was Magata, again, faking her own death by killing her sister with these personalities involved, cleaning up the room in the aftermath, leaving the robot to its own devices, sneaking out, and the body, on top of that automated robot, the P1, is actually her sister's corpse. There's so many different aspects, and now that we actually have a momentum, now that we're actually investigating clues, it's that much more intriguing. And I'm just going to be waiting with slightly bated breath to see in the next episode if that remains to be the case. I'm not entirely sure it will be. We might be back to just sitting around yapping, And so it's going to be an uphill battle to want to stay invested and interested if that is the case. But the point is, I am now, and I didn't expect to be. I expected to be like, after this episode, forget it. I'm done. I'm done talking about it, done speculating, done being interested. And I actually am quite interested. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 4 of Everything Becomes F, the Perfect Insider. If you've seen it, if you were as intrigued and just, thanking our lucky stars like I was, that there was something happening in this episode, that it was not actually boring like the first 3, where nothing really happened except like at the tail end you'd have a twist or a reveal, a cliffhanger and everything like that. And we didn't really end with a cliffhanger this time out. I mean, unless you consider Nishina Sono's own seeming nightmare or dream, whatever that manifestation has to do with, I don't know, to be one. But yeah, as I say, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this sucker, and that'll be pretty much it for me on this. So otherwise, I hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.